The gunshot echoed across the Montana prairie as Josephine Jameson stumbled forward, her blood-soaked hand clutching her side where the bullet had grazed her ribs. She had been running for what felt like hours, the sunset painting the vast landscape in hues of amber and crimson as she fled from the men who had attacked the stagecoach. The year was 1876, and the Western Territories were as beautiful as they were dangerous. She could see a small homestead in the distance, smoke rising from its chimney against the darkening sky. With each step, her strength ebbed away, the wound sapping what little energy remained after her desperate flight. The simple calico dress she wore, once a cheerful blue, was now torn and stained with dirt and blood. As she approached the modest cabin, her vision began to blur. The last of her strength abandoned her just as she reached the property's fence line. She collapsed against the weathered wood, the world spinning around her. Jackson Lawson had been tending to his horses when he heard the commotion. He stepped out of the stable, his hand instinctively moving to the Colt revolver holstered at his hip. At 30 years old, he had seen his share of trouble in these parts. 5 years ago, he had left behind his life as a ranch hand to stake his own claim on this patch of Montana soil, building a life of solitude far from the chaos of growing towns. He spotted her immediately, a crumpled form by his fence line. With long strides, he crossed the distance between them, his spurs jingling with each step. As he drew closer, he could see she was young, perhaps mid-20s, with chestnut hair that had come loose from its pins. "Madam," he called, approaching cautiously. "Madam, are you hurt?" Josephine lifted her head, her green eyes clouded with pain as she gazed up at the tall figure before her. The setting sun silhouetted him, his broad shoulders and the cowboy hat perched atop his head creating an imposing outline. "Help," she whispered, her voice barely audible. They might still be coming." Jackson knelt beside her, noticing the blood seeping through her fingers where she clutched her side. His weathered face, tanned from years under the harsh western sun, creased with concern. "Who's coming?" he asked, already scanning the horizon. "Bandits," she managed, her breathing labored. "They attacked the stagecoach. I ran, I think everyone else." She couldn't finish the sentence, tears welling in her eyes. Without hesitation, Jackson slipped one arm under her knees and the other around her shoulders, lifting her as gently as possible. She was lighter than he expected, fragile in his arms. "I'm too weak," she whispered, her head falling against his shoulder. The cowboy answered, "Then rest beside me. I'll keep you safe." He carried her toward the cabin, his eyes constantly surveying the landscape for any sign of pursuit. The modest homestead wasn't much, a one-room log cabin with a small stable beside it, but it was sturdy and defensible if needed. Inside, he carefully laid her on his bed, a simple frame with a straw-filled mattress covered by handmade quilts. The cabin was sparsely furnished but clean, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and a wooden table with 2 chairs positioned near the only window. "I need to look at that wound," he said, his voice gentle despite its natural gruffness. "My name's Jackson Lawson. Josephine Jameson," she replied, wincing as she tried to sit up. "Everyone calls me Josie." "Stay still, Miss Jameson. Let me get some water and bandages." As Jackson moved around the cabin, gathering supplies, Josie's eyes followed him. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to handling emergencies. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the nape of his neck, and a stubble of beard shadowed his jaw. "You're lucky," he said after examining her wound. "The bullet just grazed you, painful but not deadly if we keep it clean." "Thank you," she whispered as he began to clean the wound. She bit her lip to keep from crying out as the cool water made contact with her torn flesh. "I'm sorry," he said, noticing her distress. "I know it hurts." As night fell fully, Jackson lit a lamp and stoked the fire. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the gaps in the cabin walls. He had given Josie one of his clean shirts to wear while her dress dried by the fire. The garment engulfed her slender frame, making her look even more vulnerable. "You mentioned bandits," he said as he prepared a simple supper of beans and cornbread. "Was it the Blackwell gang? They've been hitting stagecoaches along the northern route." Josie shook her head. "I don't know who they were. Everything happened so fast. One minute we were traveling peacefully, the next." She trailed off, her hands trembling at the memory. "The driver was shot first, then they came for the passengers. I managed to slip away in the confusion." "I think I'm the only one who got away." Jackson's jaw tightened. "We should notify the sheriff in the morning. If you're feeling up to it, I can take you to town." "No," the fear in her voice was palpable. "I can't go to town. They might be looking for me." Jackson studied her face, noting the genuine terror in her eyes. "All right," he conceded. "You can stay here until you've healed up. I'll ride into town myself to report what happened." Relief washed over her features. "Thank you. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness." "No need for that," he replied, setting a plate of food beside her. "Anyone would do the same." But they both knew that wasn't true. The frontier was a harsh place where kindness was often in short supply. As days turned into a week, Josie's strength gradually returned. The wound on her side began to heal, thanks to Jackson's careful attention and a poultice of herbs he gathered from the surrounding countryside. She learned that he had picked up basic medical knowledge during his time riding with a cattle drive, where injuries were common and doctors rare. Each morning, Jackson would tend to his small herd of cattle and the 2 horses he kept, returning to check on Josie throughout the day. At first, their conversations were stilted, both of them unaccustomed to company. But gradually, they began to share stories of their lives. Josie told him about growing up in Boston, the daughter of a merchant who had lost everything in poor investments. After her parents' deaths from influenza the previous winter, she had decided to seek a teaching position in Oregon, using the last of her inheritance to fund the journey west. "I thought it would be an adventure," she said with a rueful smile as they sat before the fire one evening. "I never imagined it would turn out like this." Jackson, in turn, shared pieces of his own past his childhood on a farm in Missouri, his decision to head west after the war, the years he spent working on various ranches before finally saving enough to claim his own land. "It's not much," he admitted, looking around the cabin, "but it's mine." "I think it's wonderful," Josie replied sincerely. "You've built something real here, something that's yours alone." Her words seemed to warm something inside him that had been cold for a very long time. On the 9th day of her stay, Jackson announced he needed to ride into town for supplies. "I'll be back before nightfall," he promised. "Keep the door barred and there's a shotgun under the bed if you need it." Josie nodded, though the thought of being alone made her heart race with anxiety. She had grown accustomed to Jackson's quiet presence, finding comfort in the sound of his movements around the cabin. After he left, she busied herself with chores, determined to be useful. She swept the cabin floor, washed the breakfast dishes, and even attempted to bake bread using the meager supplies in Jackson's pantry. The domestic tasks helped distract her from her fear, and she found herself humming softly as she worked. The sun was beginning to set when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Relief flooded through her, but it quickly turned to terror when she realized there were multiple riders, at least 3 or 4 by the sound of it. Heart pounding, she retrieved the shotgun from under the bed, her hands shaking as she checked that it was loaded. The riders came to a stop outside and harsh voices called out. "Hello, the house. We know you're in there, girl." Josie's blood ran cold. She recognized that voice. It belonged to one of the bandits who had attacked the stagecoach. "How had they found her?" "Come on out and we won't hurt you," another voice called. "We just want what you took." Confusion mingled with her fear. She hadn't taken anything from the stagecoach except the clothes on her back. What could they possibly want from her? "I don't know what you're talking about," she called back, trying to keep her voice steady. "Please, just leave me alone." A bullet smashed through the window, sending glass shards flying across the room. Josie ducked behind the table, her heart hammering in her chest. "Next one goes through the door," the first voice threatened. "You have 1 minute to come out or we're coming in." Josie's mind raced. She couldn't surrender. These men had already shown they had no qualms about killing. But could she really hold them off alone? Just as she was considering her limited options, she heard more hoofbeats approaching at a gallop. A familiar voice rang out, "Get away from my house." Jackson had returned, and from the sound of it, he wasn't alone. Relief surged through Josie as she heard the sharp reports of gunfire outside. She kept low, clutching the shotgun, listening to the chaos of a gun battle unfolding. After what seemed like an eternity but was probably only minutes, silence fell. Then, a gentle knock at the door. "Josie, it's me. It's safe now." She rushed to unbar the door, flinging it open to find Jackson standing there, a smoking pistol still in his hand. Behind him, she could see 3 men lying motionless on the ground, while a 4th was being tied up by a man wearing a sheriff's badge. Without thinking, she threw herself into Jackson's arms, the shotgun clattering to the floor. He held her tightly, his heart beating as rapidly as her own. "You're safe," he murmured into her hair. "You're safe now." The sheriff approached, touching the brim of his hat in greeting. "Madam, I'm Sheriff Thomas. Mr. Lawson here told me about the stagecoach robbery. Seems these fellas have been terrorizing folks all across the territory." Josie stepped back from Jackson's embrace, though she stayed close to his side. "But why did they come after me specifically?" "They said I took something." The sheriff nodded toward the bound man. According to him, they had a strongbox on that coach containing gold from a bank robbery in Helena. "When they searched the wreckage after you escaped, it was missing. They figured you must have taken it." "But I didn't," Josie protested. "I didn't take anything." Jackson's brow furrowed. "Wait a minute." He turned to Josie. "You said you ran into the woods after the attack, right? Is it possible you ran past where they had hidden the strongbox?" Realization dawned on her face. "There was a box hidden under some bushes where I stopped to catch my breath. I didn't think anything of it at the time." The sheriff nodded. "That would explain it. They probably thought you discovered their hiding place and took the gold." As the sheriff prepared to take the surviving bandit to town, Jackson insisted on accompanying Josie back to the site of the stagecoach attack to search for the strongbox. The next morning, they set out together, Josie directing him to the spot where she had rested during her flight. After an hour of searching, they found a small metal box tucked beneath a tangle of underbrush. Inside was indeed a substantial amount of gold coins and currency. "We need to get this back to its rightful owners," Jackson said, securing the box to his saddle. Josie studied his face, admiring his unwavering sense of honor. In the short time she had known him, she had come to respect his quiet strength and unfailing kindness. Something else had grown to a warmth that spread through her chest whenever he was near, a flutter in her stomach when he smiled at her. They returned to the cabin as afternoon shadows lengthened across the prairie. That evening, as they sat before the fire, a comfortable silence settled between them. "I should probably try to continue to Oregon soon," Josie said finally, though the words felt heavy on her tongue. "Now that the danger has passed." Jackson's expression remained impassive, but she noticed his hands tighten on the cup of coffee he held. "Of course," he said, "if that's what you want." "It's what I planned," she replied carefully, "but plans can change." His eyes met hers, a question in their depths. "What would make them change?" Josie took a deep breath. "A reason to stay." The words hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken meaning. Jackson set down his cup and moved to sit beside her on the bench. "Would I be reason enough?" he asked, his voice low and uncertain. Instead of answering with words, Josie leaned forward and gently pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, but when Jackson's arms came around her, pulling her closer, it deepened into something more profound. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Jackson rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if savoring the moment. "I've never felt this way before," he confessed. "I know it hasn't been long, but when I thought about you leaving, it felt like my heart was being torn out." "I feel the same," Josie whispered. "The thought of saying goodbye to you." She couldn't finish the sentence. Then don't, he said simply. Stay with me, Josie. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Josie's life. The gold was returned to the bank in Helena, earning them a reward that they used to expand the cabin and purchase additional cattle for Jackson's growing herd. Word of their part in capturing the notorious bandits spread, and neighbors from miles around came to visit, curious about the Eastern woman who had helped bring the criminals to justice. As summer turned to fall, Jackson and Josie settled into a routine that felt as natural as breathing. She took over the management of the household, transforming the sparse cabin into a warm and inviting home. He taught her to ride, to shoot, and to navigate the vast Montana landscape. Together, they worked side by side, building a life neither had dared to dream of before. On a crisp October evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Jackson reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. "I've been carrying this around for weeks now, trying to find the right moment," he said, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. He opened his palm to reveal a simple gold ring. "It was my mother's. I'd be honored if you'd wear it as my wife." Tears filled Josie's eyes as she looked from the ring to his face. "Are you asking me to marry you, Jackson Lawson?" A smile spread across his features, transforming his usually serious expression. "I reckon I am, Josephine Jameson. I love you more than I ever thought possible. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she said without hesitation, her heart full to bursting. "Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and when he kissed her, it felt like a promise of all the years to come. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in town, with Sheriff Thomas and a handful of neighbors as witnesses. Josie wore a new dress of pale blue silk, ordered specially from the mercantile, while Jackson donned a new suit that made him look even more handsome than usual. As winter settled over the Montana territory, bringing with it howling winds and deep snow, the newlyweds found warmth in each other's arms. The cabin, once a lonely outpost on the frontier, became a haven of love and laughter. Spring brought new calves to the herd, and the construction of an addition to the cabin, a second room that would serve as a nursery. For Josie had joyful news to share with her husband. The baby was due in late summer, and Jackson's face had lit up with wonder when she told him. "A family," he had whispered, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our family." As her pregnancy progressed, Josie's thoughts often returned to that fateful day when she had stumbled onto Jackson's property, wounded and afraid. How close she had come to death, and how beautifully life had unfolded instead. One evening, as they sat together on the porch swing Jackson had built for her, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk, she voiced these thoughts. "Do you ever think about how easily we might never have met?" She asked, leaning her head against his shoulder. "If the stagecoach had taken a different route, if I had run in another direction." Jackson's arm tightened around her. "I prefer to think that we were meant to find each other. That no matter what path we took, we would have ended up right here together." Josie smiled, placing his hand over the swell of her belly where their child grew. "I like that thought, that we were always meant to be." Summer bloomed across the prairie, wildflowers carpeting the grasslands in vibrant colors. Josie's time grew near, and Jackson insisted on bringing a midwife from town to stay with them in preparation for the birth. Mrs. Peterson was a kindly woman with decades of experience bringing new life into the world, and her presence eased Josie's anxieties about giving birth so far from civilization. The labor began on a sweltering August afternoon. Jackson paced outside the cabin as Mrs. Peterson attended to Josie inside, his face drawn with worry as he listened to his wife's cries of pain. After what seemed like an eternity, a new sound filled the air, the lusty wail of a newborn baby. Mrs. Peterson appeared at the door, her face wreathed in smiles. "You have a daughter, Mr. Lawson, a beautiful, healthy daughter." Jackson's legs nearly gave way beneath him as relief and joy flooded through his body. He entered the cabin to find Josie propped up in bed, a tiny bundle cradled in her arms. Her face was pale and damp with sweat, but her eyes shone with a happiness that took his breath away. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly. He approached the bed with reverence, sitting carefully beside his wife. When she placed the infant in his arms, he felt tears spring to his eyes. The baby was perfect tiny fingers, a tuft of dark hair, and eyes that, when they blinked open briefly, seemed to already hold wisdom beyond her minutes of life. "What shall we name her?" Josie asked. Jackson thought for a moment, looking down at his daughter's face. "How about Hope?" "Because that's what she represents to me, hope for all the good things life has to offer." "Hope," Josie repeated, testing the name. "Hope Lawson, it's perfect." As the years passed, the Lawson homestead flourished. Jackson's cattle herd grew, and with the profits, they were able to purchase additional land. A proper ranch house replaced the original cabin, though they kept it standing as a reminder of where their story had begun. Hope was joined by two brothers, Thomas, named after the sheriff who had become a dear friend, and William, after Josie's father. The Lawson children grew strong and free in the wide, open spaces of Montana, learning to ride almost as soon as they could walk. Josie never did become a schoolteacher in Oregon, but she found her calling nonetheless. As more families settled in the area, she began teaching the local children in a small schoolhouse Jackson and the other men built on the edge of their property. Her classroom was filled with the sons and daughters of ranchers and farmers, all eager to learn from the woman who had once outrun bandits and helped bring them to justice. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jackson surprised Josie with a trip back east to visit Boston, the city she had left behind. They spent a month exploring her childhood haunts, showing their children the world their mother had come from. But when it was time to return home, Josie felt only relief and anticipation. "Did you ever regret it?" Jackson asked as their train carried them westward again. "Giving up your plans for Oregon, settling for a rancher's life instead of the city comforts you were used to?" Josie's answer was immediate and sincere. "Not for a single moment. I found more in Montana than I ever dreamed possible: love, family, purpose. How could I regret that?" The children dozed across from them. Hope, now a spirited girl of 9 with her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes, the boys still young enough to be worn out by the day's excitement. Jackson took Josie's hand, his thumb brushing over the gold band he had placed there a decade before. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day when I found you by the fence?" "I said I was too weak," she recalled with a smile. "And I told you to rest beside me," he finished. "Little did I know you'd be resting beside me for the rest of our lives." Josie leaned her head against his shoulder, watching the landscape roll past the window. The vast plains they would soon call home again stretched to the horizon, wild and beautiful. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be," she whispered. As the train carried them back to Montana, back to the life they had built together from the most unlikely of beginnings, Josie reflected on the journey that had brought her here. A stagecoach robbery that should have ended her life had instead led her to the greatest love she could have imagined. One moment of terror had opened the door to a lifetime of joy. The frontier was still wild, still dangerous in many ways, but she faced it without fear now. Because no matter what challenges came their way, she and Jackson would face them together, drawing strength from the love that had blossomed in the shadow of violence, a love as vast and enduring as the Montana sky above them. And when night fell and the children were tucked into their beds, she would rest beside her cowboy, safe in the knowledge that they had found in each other exactly what they had never known they were searching for: a home, a family, and a love strong enough to tame the Wild West, one day at a time.